get started here, and,
Yep.
and I'd like to introduce you somewhat from what I know of you.
All
And
right.
if you feel anything that you want to add, you've already given some detail about your European experience earlier. If you want to add anything, uh, don't feel like you're being braggadocious. Not everybody knows you yet,
All right.
so we'll go from there. But
Absolutely.
I've met Wade
Hi,
Gugino.
people.
He's a local cartoonist in Holland, Michigan here, and I've met him when I was looking for a local artist for help at the Holland Civic Theater, and he put together one of our posters and was very successful. I enjoyed working with him, and through the process of working with him, I found out a little bit about him, and he's very talented, not only athletically, as he mentioned to me earlier today. He played 15 years of European basketball, and then I'm not sure how soon after. That's what I'm going to find out. But opened up his own shingle for applied cartooning, and has established himself locally here, uh, whether he might say it or not, as a bedrock of talent in Holland. I mean, you go into JP's, one of the local coffee places that's popular, and Wade's artwork is on the wall. Grand Rapids has their art prize every year, and for 3 years now, Wade has had an entry, which is a great representation for Holland. And if you want talent of art, and I haven't played him in basketball, but probably basketball, you want to meet Wade.
That basketball is dwindling. I'm going to be 44 here shortly, and strangely, you don't jump as well at 44 as you did back at 26. But
Not everybody goes into business for themselves.
it's true.
What was it in your life that triggered this option? You mentioned your stint in Europe,
Mm-hmm.
but what was it exactly? Where was the time that you realized you weren't going to be getting a 9-to-5 job at a factory, or applying for a job at an office or something, or a career working for someone else? When was it that triggered in your mind, you know what, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to do cartooning, and I'm going to turn it into a lucrative business, or a sustainable business. Was there a point?
Yes. Believe it or not, it was when I was 5. I have always wanted to be a cartoonist. And I played basketball because I knew that I wouldn't be able to play basketball later, and I enjoyed basketball, and I knew that I could put away money to be able to start cartooning. And I knew that cartooning is one of those gigs where for 5 years or for 20 years you might be eating grass in the backyard, and then something takes off and goes somewhere. So even though some of the things that I invested money into from basketball didn't pan out in the way that I would like, we still had enough money to get started and get moving and so forth. I had hoped that some of those things that I had invested in would bring me in a regular income, so that cartooning would just be sort of cream of the crop on top of things. But I find that basically, month to month, you're kind of like this, trying to pay the bills and so on. But I've always wanted to be a cartoonist, and when I was done playing basketball overseas in 2007, when we came home, I figured, I can go and get a job, and I can start to build more money towards this and have a better cushion, or I can start doing what I've always wanted to do now. And if I'm ever going to do it, it's probably going to have to be now, because it's not going to start sometime later. And so really, from the time we came home in 2007, I just have been working on cartoons. And I thought that I knew a lot about it because I've been published in overseas publications, and I've seen how syndication works, and I've seen how different channels work for cartoon publishing. But for what I'm trying to do, which is apply cartoons to communication needs in other areas like business and education, healthcare, and so on, I really needed to learn this business a lot more. And it's been a long, slow road, but we're getting to the point where there are specific applications that really have a big future, and I'm kind of happy about that.
Now, even though you started with somewhat of a nest egg,
Hmm.
you mentioned that it wasn't as big as you were hoping. So
Right, sure.
that probably opened up the opportunity for fears.
Oh, tons. And they're still there. I mean, one of the things that you learn as you go on, especially if you haven't done this before, I mean, having played basketball for 15 years, you don't get the business side of life, so you don't know what's positive and what's negative all the time. I spent 9 whole months at one point after I got home courting NASCAR through a couple of people that I knew, because I thought that those would be great camps and a great application for cartoons, and we were looking at developing a graphic novel for them, only to find out 9 months into it that the people that I was working through were not representing themselves as truthfully as possible, and they didn't really have the connections within NASCAR that they said they had. So you're preparing all of this work and you're putting things together and you're presenting it to other people, and you're waiting for response because they're the ones who are presenting it to people, and you're getting nothing back and you're getting nothing back, and they thought that they might be able to use it to get some interest in things, but in the end, you don't know if you don't have experience with business. I mean, I checked out the credentials as much as possible by calling NASCAR. I did a number of different things that would be considered due diligence, and those just didn't yield the information that I needed.
Now you've learned how to deal with those people or recognize them because
Mm-hmm.
of your experience. But if you had the chance to give someone that wisdom that doesn't have that experience on avoiding what you ran into,
Right.
how could you package that of what to look for or what to ask when they're meeting a new client in order to avoid those pains?
I think that there are a lot of things out there that automatically already give you sort of, look into people's background. There are lots of things that you can find out there that are going to be ways that would help you. And I would certainly love to, like my nephew does play overseas. I sit down and I talk with him from time to time about, this agent's going to ask for this, don't get locked in for that, and that sort of thing. Don't get locked in with one guy because then they don't do the work for you that you need unless they're, a really high level person. In the end, there's really no teacher-like experience, although you do want to avoid big pitfalls. And I think in what I'm doing, there are probably specific applications of what I'm working on that I'll be able to teach other people to avoid this pitfall and avoid that pitfall. But by and large, I mean, business management has been figured out pretty well, and I'm probably not going to add an awful lot to that gamut of things other than to say, when people say you've got to be persistent and continue to work and continue to believe in your dream and continue to move forward even when other people don't see it, and half the time you don't say, sometimes you're like, boy, am I deluding myself here? Is this really here or not? You just have to move forward. I move forward prayerfully. I happen to be a person of faith, and for me that really is the guide.
Because people are going to take advantage of you, or they're not going to reveal their true connections. But if you've got, like for you, it was faith. If you've got a calling, if you've got a drive to succeed, don't give up.
Right.
And take them into consideration that you're going to fail.
Right.
Or fall.
I think that's it. I think that in basketball I failed a ton, and I just kept on going. And half of the Division One guys are guys who were weeding out of the CBA and the NBA that were coming overseas. They just didn't want to stay with it that long. So eventually you became the default guy. And perhaps that's not a strength or a talent or something along that line, but I find that staying long enough with what you do until you learn the business well enough in order to do what you doing at the best is something that isn't overrated. I mean, that's really where it's at, and sometimes that takes a very, very long time, and it's not just not giving up. It is, you have to be a little bit lucid about it and a little bit like you're, how can I say this? You have to listen to other people, but at the same time, you have to know in your heart what it is that you want to do. And if what they're saying is correct, you have to feed it into what's in your heart and move forward. I don't do this job because it's going to make $1 million or $1 billion or whatever in the future. I do this job because it's something that hasn't been done out there, and I really want to see it out there. And I know a number of other people who would like to see something that I'm building out there the way that it's being built. And the way that I'd like to grow it, I think, is going to have a positive impact. And so it's like anything else. I'm sure that there are numbers of things that would have been better for society that people tried to build and it just didn't work out, I mean, different kinds of cars or different kinds of transportation or whatever. But I think this is going to be really good in the future for everybody. And, especially with mobile devices and so on, being able to clearly and succinctly, concisely get your idea across to people with little visual packets that have just enough text to make people understand what you want and move them to the next level of what you're working on. That to me is a huge idea for the future.
Oh, yeah.
probably more than any business advice that I could give you that you'd see on TechCrunch or on any of the other areas where, people are sitting down and saying, you need to use this, or you need to do that, or you need to employ this kind of a Six Sigma approach for management or that kind of a thing. I'd say God's in control. Trust him. You have to do the work. You have to get out there and try, and he, lets you muddle around a little bit so that you learn, but you have to always come back and trust in him, and that'll move your business forward.
Is there anyone from your beginning in 2006 or 2007
Seven, right?
That you would say, yeah, what, I remember calling continually that person or asking them for business advice, or remember my wife did such and such for me, and that really helped.
I gleaned a lot from a lot of different people. One of the things about having played basketball at Hope College is everybody seems to know everybody who plays basketball at Hope College. So already in Holland, even after playing overseas for a number of years, I had a lot of contacts with people that were sort of casual contacts, but folks that you could call on and say, what about this idea? What about that idea? We have some folks that live across our street that were real successful business folks, and I would bounce a couple of ideas off of that neighbor quite a bit, and he would give me some feedback. My brother Scott has had a glass business here in town for 20 years, and for probably 15 of those years, it's been great, and then it's been horrible, and then it's been great, and then it's been horrible, and everybody had real severe cutbacks in 2007 through 2009 there, 2010. And for him as well, because he's in the construction industry, all of the housing starts were way down. All of the, values of homes were going down. Nobody was buying new and nobody was building. And, he was down to just basic brass tacks at that point. And I would sit and talk with him, and he'd say, well, we're doing this, and we're doing this, and this is all we can do to move forward. And it would end up that I would ask him about different things, and he'd say, well, try this, this, and this. And my brother Todd, when he was alive as well, would say the same from kind of a nonprofit approach from the college, and he would put me in connection with a number of folks like that as well. But what I really liked about Scott, the glass business, was there were points at which he was down to just himself and one or two other people in the office, and now they've got 25 or 26 people that work for them, and they have what's the word I'm looking for? Not businesses, but they have locations here in Holland and in Grand Haven, and they're starting to work towards one in Grand Rapids. And just seeing him persist, working with the banks, talking through things with people, and realizing that it's about servicing the client and dealing with the client more than it is about any magic business formula or management formula or anything along that line, that it is about giving people what they want, and then if they don't know what they want, trying to move them in a direction that is both profitable and at the same time interesting and in a way that they haven't looked at things before. And he does really cool stuff with glass, and so for me to see that and to know that my product, while it's something that's different than anybody else has seen out there, really needs to be approached from the standpoint of, this is really cool and you need to be doing it, as opposed to, hey, this is a crazy cartoon approach, why don't we try this and see what happens? It's made a big difference to me to say that this business really has a position and it can move forward. And the more that I talk with other folks out there with different applications, there have been lots of folks in lots of organizations who've said, hey, have you tried this? Why don't you try this? This is really going well. I can see that you're moving in a good direction with this. And that's encouraging. It's that kind of business mentorship that I've had, but because it's a small operation, I don't have like, the way I am, you can cut,
sure
2/3 of any of this out.
It's still running, so.
All the ums you can get out of there.
No, the one other question, and you just started going into it, was where do you see, because you've mentioned about the future, about building it out.
Right.
Where do you see the future for
this?
Genius, yeah.
Oh boy. I could take it out in layers, but basically right now, one of the applications that I'm working on is some industrial signage, and I've been doing this for a manufacturer of car parts in Grand Rapids. And basically they put big signs over top of each one of their work cells that give sort of a 10,000-foot overview of what that cell is supposed to do, and it has a caricature of the person who works there, and it's got the product that they're building their part for, and some other information about the rates per minute or rates per hour and that kind of a thing. In the long run, I want all of this, and this is maybe my mistake coming back home, I want all of this to be a tool online. I'd like to create software that allows people to create the visual layouts that they want and give them tools that will allow them to express clearly what it is that they want their communication to be, so that it's not my business necessarily doing it all the time, although we'll offer that. I want people to have the tool to be able to do that themselves. And I've got ideas on how to build that and put that together, but that's a starting out, that's probably about a $2 million build. And I haven't been able to convince anybody that $2 million is worth throwing at a cartoon application. And that partially is the timing from when I came home in 2007. Again, everything was kind of tanking and cartoons were not first on people's list. But beyond that, being able to sit down and show them the breadth of what that tool would be able to do in the actual market and grow with, I just haven't been able to articulate that well enough. So I've taken 2 or 3 aspects like the industrial signs and now some preschool children's books that teach character and school readiness objectives. And I'm saying these are areas that cartoons can be applied to tangibly. These are the kinds of revenues that those can bring in. Now let's start building a studio that is able to apply these in a broader sense, and then beyond that, I'd like to be able to build an internet tool that allows other people to build those in a broader sense. So that's the long-term crazy goal of Gugenius. It helps me categorize my thinking.
No, I think I could put together if I had time, if I could sit down and extrapolate from what you talked about, I could put together a pretty decent business article based on what you said.
Cool.
So
Well, I'm
I
glad.
appreciate your time.
Folks, Idea Dots, man. It's going big. That's the other one. Gugenius, buy stock. Idea Dots, buy bigger stock. Taking off.